Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome back. Welcome back. Do you know what that's giving? Is if anybody used to listen to, what was their podcast called? Oh my gosh, the podcast with Megan, Ashley, and B Simone. I forgot what it's called now, but they don't do it anymore because they're not friends. But they used to sing "Welcome Back," every time they opened an episode, and I feel like that spirit is on me. So you might be serenaded for the next few weeks. But welcome back to It's That Deep, the podcast. My name is Feyisara. This is the podcast where everything is literally that deep, from pop culture to politics to TV to music to current affairs, you name it, it is that deep. And we are back for another episode. We are on episode 13, I believe. And it has been, as most weeks are, it has been a week. What has happened this week? I'm not even talking personally. This week, what has happened? Okay, so we've had Donald Trump is, as I predicted, guys, the front runner for the Republican nominee for the presidency. So we've been transported back to 2020 because it's Trump v. Biden again. What else happened? Jake Paul has decided to go into the ring with Mike Tyson. Is it Mike Tyson or Tyson Fury? It's Mike Tyson. I don't know sports. Do you know what I mean? It's Tyson Fury. We had the budget this week. Jeremy Hunt, the Chancellor of the Exchequer, dropped the budget. As I've said before, like, economics not my strong point. So we're still working that one out. But what else happened? There was news that Champion, the BBC, is it BBC Three? I think it's a BBC Three series, is not coming back for a second season. It hasn't been cancelled, but the creator of the show has decided not to go ahead. So it's a lot has happened this week, and there's just much to discuss. And I'm kind of upset that I've stuck myself to 2 honorable mentions and 1 main story, because it feels like there's just so much more, do you know what I mean, that we really need to unpack every week. But we ain't got the time, because I ain't doing that. So let's get into our honorable picks, and let's see how this goes. So honorable pick number 1, and this week Talk TV have announced that by summer of this great 2024 they will be off air completely, and they'll be operating solely as a digital/online presence. So just for context, if you don't know, Talk TV are and I use this phrase lightly, broadcast news channel. News is up for contention here, but they're a broadcast news channel that operate under News UK, and News UK is owned by Rupert Murdoch. So if you know anything about Rupert Murdoch, think Fox News, think The Sun, think that really like trashy, salacious, slanderous style of journalism, particularly very right wing. So they're owned by Rupert Murdoch, and in 2022 they were given their license by Ofcom to fully function as a broadcast channel. And like I said, very right wing. They've given platforms to the likes of Piers Morgan, need I say any more, Jeremy Kyle, what's this lady's name now, Vanessa Feltz, so very right wing, very they enjoy like very outrageous styles of reporting and journalism. Can't lie, I was a bit curious when he was given the channel in the first place, because I feel like if you are aware of Rupert Murdoch, you know that he has a very big hold on media globally, but also politics. But it's never been to the extent where he has, like, particularly on broadcast TV, his own channel. Like, this is operated fully by Rupert Murdoch, whereas like he's had shares in Sky before, he had shares in Disney, I think he sold some of his shares, like, but this is Rupert Murdoch's brand. So even that, I was like, oh, interesting that they even gave him the channel to begin with. But 2 years down the line, they're making the decision to completely cut it off air. I think it's so interesting and so somewhat indicative of the fact that outrageous style of like Fox News journalism, I don't think is working in the UK anymore. I think that's my biggest takeaway from this honorable pick, is that people are not, like, the UK and the US markets are very different, and I don't know that there's an appetite in the UK for that real low down, dirty, right wing, gutter style of news. Like, and spend 5 minutes on Fox News and you just know it's chaos, and it gets personal and it gets dirty and it gets nasty. And I don't really feel like there is room for that in the UK. I think we're a bit more dignified than the Americans. And so for them to be packing things up 2 years in, I think there's a real indication that people are not on that. And maybe they try to sell that to us and package it as like, this is American and this is how the Americans do it, so we should be doing it that way. But I don't think it's gone down that well in the UK. I also think, thinking about what I was speaking about a few weeks ago with like Ofcom and regulating digital spaces, and the fact that there are no governing bodies yet that are regulating digital spaces, I find it interesting that they would move to solely online and solely digital, maybe as a way of escaping accountability, maybe as a way of avoiding regulation, because they know that YouTube doesn't have what national terrestrial broadcasters have. So I think that is also really, really interesting. Like, are you purposely, Piers Morgan, we're looking at you because he made the move first. He left Talk TV before Talk TV sank. But like, did you make that move so that you wouldn't be held to account the way he was when he was on GMB? I don't know. I think this is how I think. Just, it's very tactical and it's very convenient that you would make the move to digital, particularly because if their target audience, which for the most part is like older, again, more right wing, more white, these men are not going on YouTube to find news. These men are also not, they're definitely not going to find Talk TV news like clipped on TikTok, because they don't use those platforms. And so I find it really interesting why they would want to direct their audiences to a platform that they wouldn't naturally go to. And I think at the core of it is a desire to avoid accountability. And it's it's interesting to me. I'm always very skeptical of like right wing, that real tabloidy style of content. I hate it. I really don't think it has a place in our society. And that's why I keep a watchful eye. I keep a watchful eye over these sort of institutions, because they're very tactical. And I also think, it's so interesting. I think they're extra tactical, and they're being extra tactical in an election year, because if they're saying by like, okay, let's say worst case scenario, by August they're off air, the prep for the election campaigns are going to be underway. So how are you telling me that you are going to push your viewership in a particular way to vote, but your viewership won't be able to find you where they typically do? How's that going to work out? So, I'm just, one eye is open. We're just watching very closely, and I'm going to, just see how it all unfolds. I think it'll be quite interesting, particularly in an election year. But yeah, that's my first honourable pick. I thought I'd keep it short and sweet, do you know what I mean? Because we've got a bit of a interesting main story. So yeah, let's go ahead and do our second honourable pick. So honourable pick number 2. Now, we're still in the arena of British politics, but I feel like this one is a bit meatier. So basically last week, Rishi Sunak, or as I affectionately call him, or Rishi, because if you know, you know. But yeah, or Rishi Sunak, he called a emergency press conference last Friday at like 6 p.m. And I just thought to myself, where are your manners? Where are your manners? Because it's 6 o'clock on a Friday. People are either on their way home to like sit in bed and enjoy the weekend, or they're stood outside a pub somewhere with drinks in their hand. Like, why are you doing this? It's a Friday. But obviously there was something that he thought he needed to address. So he called the emergency press conference now, and the bulk of that press conference was discussing extremism and how extremism is a threat to our democracy. And it felt very like fear-mongery. It felt a bit ill-placed, because it was like, well, what are you trying to reference that you're not explicitly referencing? And then as the speech went on and it went on, it very much, he started started to slip into discussion about protests and not allowing extremism to hijack protests. And I said, well, bingo, here it is. It was like he was trying to reference these pro-Palestinian protests but address it with like an undertone of like, this is extremist in nature, this is anti-British in nature. And I just thought that's really interesting to do off of the back of literally what we discussed last week, like the rise in anti-Islamophobia, also anti-Semitic hate crimes, but also just against the backdrop of everything that's happening still in Israel and Gaza. I just found it interesting that he would continue to frame these protests in that manner. So I thought that was really interesting and just something to be aware of naturally. But what made it even more interesting was the fact that Michael Gove came out the following week and was like, the government are planning to expand or to broaden the definition of extremism. And I said, this is something they had attempted last year because I remember reading about it. But the fact that they're trying to do it again in light of particular protests, which have gotten a massive turnout, it really does show me that they're trying to criminalize particular political stances. And, you know, as I always say, like, language is so important, because I can't really understand how by the click of a finger you're able to change the definition of extremism to suit you and your government at present. So the present, as in today's definition of extremism, according to the British government, is vocal and active opposition against fundamental British values. Again, on the surface, it all sounds very like that makes a lot of sense. But who defines what are even fundamental British values? And why do the government get to define what is vocal and active opposition against that? Naturally, with words like extremism, we just have to be a bit more careful, because that line is always moving. That definition is always changing. Like, there was a point in time we thought women having the right to vote was extreme. Well, not me, but society thought that women having the right to vote was extreme. We look at that today now and we're like, that is a basic human right. That is so incredibly moderate. And who's to say in a year's time that the very definition that the Tories, you know, write up as extremism, let's say Labour get elected in the next election, who's to say they won't turn around and, by your own definition, call you an extremist? And so this is what I mean when I say language is important. And what it looks like to me is that this is a very, like, last minute, quick, fickle attempt to really silence certain protesters and to stop people from protesting out of fear of being labelled extremists. I don't really think they care about extremism. I don't really think they are worried about, like, of course they're worried about terrorism, the government, but I think they're using this as a guise to really address pro-Palestinian protesters. Because when you do that, it's easier to stop people from protesting, because there's now a criteria that you can see, either I fulfill it or I don't, and if I don't, I could end up in trouble here. So that's what I'm reading all of this as. I also think, again, in an election year, a very strategic way of ensuring maybe that they get certain people's votes. So by doing everything unhanded and in their power to stop people protesting against Israel, they know that it's bringing a particular demographic of votes on board and cementing those. And so all very sinister, all very, like, I would rather you back your beef and say it with your full chest you don't want people to protest. But I feel like it's these okay, we're not going to say don't protest, we're just going to change the definition of extremism so that you protest and fall under the category of an extremist, and then you're stopped. Like, just say it with your chest. If that's what you want, say it with your chest. But I do think people now who are protesting need to be all the more careful and all the more cautious, because there's so many loopholes and so many, like, runarounds that they're trying to make people do just to execute that very, very simple right of protest. And it's a bit mad. Like, it's I mean, I've said it before, it's fascism, isn't it? Okay, so my main story, I am excited for this one. We're switching gears completely. No more politics talk. I want to talk about reality TV, one of my favorite things. And I want to talk about Love is Blind because I finished the last episode last night and I said, there's something in here. If you know me anyway, personally, you know I love reality TV, and particularly because it's more than just, cameras. It's a real life look into human behavior and how humans interact with one another. So I love it. But I never watched Love is Blind before. This was my first season watching Love is Blind, and I said, we must talk because there's things in here, there's lessons in here that one can extrapolate and apply to real life. Look at me, I'm blowing the big English for you guys. But let's get into Love is Island. Love is blind. Some lessons we can learn, some things we've gauged about human behavior from this season. Okay, so first things first, my most important statement of this entire segment is that Chelsea is mad. Chelsea, Megan Foe, she's mad. She's mad. Like, she did not need that show. She needed therapy. I just think that's the place where we have to start. And now we're going to get into the lessons, but I couldn't move on without saying that. She's mad. There's something not clicking up there. But anyway, in terms of lessons, I mean, there's so much that Love is Blind gave us in the way of content. I think there's a conversation here about love and romanticizing love and comparison. Like, one of my favorite episodes was when all the couples came together for the first time and saw each other's partners, and the same thing happens on Married at First Sight, where like everyone gets together, but it's really when you start seeing other couples that you start sizing up each other, and you start even looking internally and you're like, oh, are we as strong as we thought we were? You know what I mean? So that was interesting. Obviously there's a conversation about like, is love blind? Are we more attracted to personality? Are we more attracted to looks? And then obviously a whole conversation about like marriage and really what people's expectations are. And I think one of my biggest takeaways from the season was looking at Ken and Brittany. So quick rundown for anybody who hasn't watched it or is not interested to watch it. Obviously they go into these pods and they talk to each other, but they cannot see one another. So everything is supposed to be like, the initial attraction is supposed to be based off of your conversation and your personality, as opposed to, I like how she looks, I like how he looks. So Kenneth is a big black man. I think he's a principal. He loves Jesus. Brittany is a very young white babe, also loves Jesus. And they get on, they have amazing chemistry in the pods. They come out, they have amazing chemistry when it's just the two of them. They're really into each other. They have like they felt like one of the best matches in terms of like their lives are very well suited to one another. So obviously they're now in their, love, whatever, they're loving one another. And it's when they get together with all the couples that we begin to see the cracks. So Kenneth has a conversation with AD, who is she's the lady in the season's only black couple. And they have a conversation about like interracial relationships, and is Brittany, because obviously they're going to get married, so like, is Brittany able as a white girl to steward a black husband and eventually one day black kids? I don't believe in a one drop rule. Those kids will not be black, they will be half black. But anyway, is when I tell you his whole demeanor change, like, is really a task for on a show where like Chelsea was and Matthew a literal serial killer and Jimmy was, like, for you to come out for me as the biggest villain on a show where there's literal murderers. I'm joking, guys, nobody's murdered anyone, but like, that's how bad it got. Like, he was, after that conversation with AD, became very cold, very unaffectionate. He could not look Brittany in the eye, wasn't really engaging her in conversation, and everything switched up literally in one moment. And I found that so interesting. There was even a really fascinating conversation this week on Twitter about friendships and relationships and ghosting people. And I feel like when I was watching Ken and Brittany, I was watching in real time I was watching ghosting happen in real time. Like, I know ghosting is an online thing. Actually, it's not just an online thing, but like it happens typically on online spaces. And despite the fact that he was physically present, living with her, around her, mentally he had checked out. But even that being the case, like, that was never really the issue, that he had checked out. It was the fact that, and this is at the core of ghosting, was that there was no communication. There was no conversation of like, this is now how I feel, this is now how I want to address things. And I do think, to make it deep, because it's that deep, I do think there's something there, and something in that reflects our inability in this modern age to communicate with one another, to be open and to be honest, and to have those difficult conversations, because we don't have to. I feel like ghosting is such a thing anymore because we don't have to have those conversations, because at the click of a button you can block someone, or you can delete their number, or you can unfollow them on Instagram. Like, there's so many mechanisms and so many opportunities for us to avoid confrontation, so we don't have it. We just cease communication with people. And I feel like that's what happened with Kenneth and Brittany, but it just happened in real time, like live action. He, rather than having the difficult conversation where he really should have addressed the issue of race, which he never did, he just gaslit her. Instead of doing that, he just shut down and closed himself off. And it was such an uncomfortable watch, guy. It was so uncomfortable. And it literally mirrors how people behave on social media. It literally mirrors like how people treat one another the minute it gets too tough, the minute they don't like an opinion that's expressed, the minute they don't like an interaction. It's just walls up. Oh, actually, I don't have to interact with you, I can just block you. And even on that issue of race as well, because that is the primary reason. No matter how he wants to gaslight her and spin it, that's the primary reason he stopped engaging with Brittany on that level. And I do wonder, like, if they had like, if the format of the show was that they're not gonna mix with other couples, they were just gonna get married and live together, I wonder if the outcome would have been different. And I do think it would have, because again, going back to social media, like, we're in an age where like everything is comparative. You are literally 24/7 looking at and beholding other people's quote unquote achievements. And so inevitably, what that does is cause you to hold the magnifying glass up to yourself and assess yourself even deeper. And I feel like because Kenneth saw AD and Clay, the only black couple, you know, supposedly depicting black love, he put the magnifying glass up to himself and he started to inspect and assess. And he would not have done that had they not been around him. Another conversation there about like the role other people play in how much we actually treasure our achievements. Like, do I consider something to be an achievement because I esteem it, or because everyone around me is applauding it, or do I now give my achievements a little weight because I'm watching everybody else and actually they have something I don't have, so I devalue what I do have? And so I found that interesting. But actually, on the topic of black love, it's a facade. I'm joking. Black love is not a facade. Shout out all my black monoracial couples. But this black love that was depicted this season, I never want to see it again. If you're listening to me, producers, I never want to see it again, because it was toxic. Okay, context again for anybody who hasn't watched the show. So AD and Clay are our only black couple, black woman, black man in this series. I don't know how many people there were in this whole cohort, but they are our only black couple, and they are also one of the two couples that made it to the end of the process, so the altar. They get to the altar now, spoiler alert, sorry guys, they get to the altar now. AD says, of course I do, and Clay says, actually I don't. And you know, someone tweeted like, this is such a reflection of modern dating, particularly modern black dating, because there is this weird thing where people like romanticize, and I'm not here to give my thoughts on interracial dating, or I don't really give a heck. But I do think people romanticize black love so much so that they're willing to overlook so much nonsense. And I do think that is what has had generations of black people in a chokehold for a very long time, because Clay is not a normal person. He's not a normal person. Like, I said this to my friend, he twerked in front of AD with a red flag wrapped around his body. He was never serious. He was telling you, I'm going to cheat. It's in my bloodline. It's hereditary. And because Omar she wants to go and do black love, she said, but I will jump off a cliff for you. I love you. Let's be guided. Let's be guided. No, don't let us lose ourselves, guys. Like, what is it about this idea of black love that makes, but I'm gonna go ahead and say the women, correct me if I'm wrong, but it makes the women a bit crazy. It makes them lose their marbles. It makes them lose sense and ignore the neon red. This is modern dating as a black person in real life. Like, it's this, handsome, athletic guy who's got the IG baddie, the BBL baddie. He's incredibly unemotionally available. She is, and I guess there's also, something here about, like, she's 33, so she's culturally past, or culturally past that age of, like, okay, you should be married now. So there's obviously a pressure there as well that has probably fed into, like, why she's accepted so much nonsense. And it never works. And this is what we're seeing in the particularly black British dating scene. Like, it's a mess. It's a jungle. It is a jungle. And people are not being realistic with their expectations or what they're able to offer, because I don't know why any person would go on a show called Love is Blind knowing that the end of the process is about marriage, but you are telling us at the altar that you're not ready for marriage. Is that not dithering behavior? Is that not the behavior of someone who's not stable? Why didn't you read the terms and conditions? And I just think we can look at Love is Blind and draw so many parallels and so many lessons from how people move, particularly when it comes to love and to marriage and to dating. And we can also see what we don't want to do. Like, I hope people are watching AD and were like, I would never, like, that can't be me. I'm sorry that she had to be the sacrificial lamb, but it is what it is, you know what I mean? Like, I really hope, to my single ladies, we were watching that and, like, no, don't go and take a Clay. Don't go and put Clay down. Don't do it, because it's not worth the wahala. It's just not worth it. So how do I conclude this? I think they weren't the only couples that there's lessons to learn from, but they're black, so naturally I have an inclination towards them. But I think I watched them and I learned what not to do in this whole dating, courting, whatever you want to call it, process. I also looked at them, and particularly in the case of Kenneth and Brittany, I'm like, okay, it is like a call and a reminder to get deep, pun intended, to really, like, audit and self-assess when you have allowed external voices and comparative, elements of other people's like, you've allowed all of that to bleed into not just relationships. I think there's a commentary here on, like, life in general, watching other people too much and being, envious of other people and being dishonest with yourself about what you really want in order maybe to please someone or to please a boss or to please, anyone. I think there is, oh my gosh, there's so much in it. But I think one thing I know for certain, love is not blind. Let me say that. Love is not blind. And if you think love is blind, you're a liar. You are a liar. Sorry guys, but I think I want to do more reviews on like TV shows and stuff. Like I remember the Beckham documentary came out. I was like, oh damn, I wish this came out later so I could have talked about it. But I found it, really, really interesting. Let me know what your thoughts were, guys, on Love Is Blind. Yeah, apparently there's been crazier seasons. I don't know, crazier men. Is it even possible for there to have been crazier men? Because those men were mad. But yeah, let me know what your thoughts were on Love Is Blind, on AD and Clay, on Kenneth and Brittany, on all of them. I'll be really, really interested to know. Am I thinking too deeply? Is it that deep? I don't know. So that wraps up episode 13 of It's That Deep. Thanks for tuning in. Do remember this is available to watch on YouTube or listen to on Spotify, whatever tickles your fancy. To be honest, I don't mind. Rate, if you are on Spotify, rate the episode. You can give it 2 stars. I don't mind. No, really, I don't mind. But yeah, rate it, like, comment, subscribe. I feel like I haven't said that in a minute. It feels like I'm begging though. It's like, don't beg, it's disgusting. If you want to subscribe. I'm not going to force you. But anyway, if you want like, comment, subscribe. Let me know what you're thinking. Let me know what you're feeling. I did get some feedback this week, which really made me smile. So thank you to that person if you're listening to this episode. And yeah, we'll be back next week for another round of stories, I would love to do another TV review. I really would. So let's see. But anyway, we'll be back next week. Thank you ever so much for all of the love and the support. And yeah, love and guidance. See ya.